Hi everyone, welcome back to another feature show on AHGP. Today's show continues the discussion around driver moves for 2023, but we're focusing on the rookies in the field this year. I'm joined by Fraser Ford and we dive into Oscar Piastri and how he might cause issues for Lando Norris at McLaren. We start the music for musical chairs at AlphaTauri and Red Bull, and we take a look at Logan Sargent ahead of his debut with Williams. This was a super fun conversation. I hope you enjoy it as much as we did. Alfa Romeo's Zhou Guanyu was the sole rookie driver in 2022, but in 2023, there will be 3 rookies on the F1 grid. 2021 FIA Formula 2 champion Oscar Piastri definitely won't be driving for Alpine. He's joined Lando Norris at McLaren. Logan Sargent graduates directly from F2 to replace Nicholas Latifi at Williams, giving America their first driver since 2015. 2019 F2 champion and 2021 Formula E world champion Nick de Vries has joined AlphaTauri as a second Dutch driver on the grid. With me to assess the rookie class of 2023 is F2 show host Fraser Ford. Welcome to the show, Fraser. How are you?
Yeah, all good. Thank you very much for having me, mate. Appreciate it.
Excellent to have you here. Tell us a little bit about your involvement with Inside F2.
Yeah, so inside F2, obviously solely focusing on all things Formula 2. And yeah, I'm very lucky to be the podcast host. We host podcasts all the way through the season, previewing every round, reviewing every round of the Formula 2 season, talking about all the talking points. So yeah, I feel very grateful to be given or trusted in that position and given the opportunity to do that. But yeah, obviously absolutely love Formula 2. So much goes on in that series, and it's so nice seeing the drivers come through all the way from the junior ranks all the way into Formula One. And, you know, we've seen over the years the likes of Charles Leclerc, George Russell, Lando Norris, you know, they all start obviously at the bottom and work their way up. And it's very nice being able to, I suppose, yeah, put our thoughts out there and opinions on their careers as they evolve. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's always good to keep an eye on the next generation of driver coming through. And there's never a race that goes by without a little bit of action or something to talk about in Formula 2. Those guys are making the headlines on the track, and in Piastri's case, off the track when they're not even racing. So, you know, there's always plenty to talk about when it comes to Formula 2. So it's great to have you here with me. We're going to be discussing F1's 3 newest drivers today. And for clarity, I'm defining Nick de Vries as a rookie still, because he'd still qualify for that rookie rule for FP1 practice in 2022, having contested just the one race in Monza, where he super subbed for Alex Albon. So to kick things off, which of the 3 rookies are you most looking forward to seeing on track this year, Fraser?
I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing all of them, to be fair. But if I had to pick one, I would probably say Oscar Piastri, just going off of his junior career and the rise that he's had up to Formula One. Obviously, I appreciate he hasn't been in any kind of racing this season. But I mean, you look at his junior series, if you like. I mean, winning Formula Renault Euro Cup back in 2019, jumping straight into F3, winning F3 at the first time of asking, and then jumping straight into Formula 2 in 2021 and winning that at the first time of asking. I mean, that's, you know, you're talking the only drivers that have done that previously: Lewis Hamilton, you've got Charles Leclerc, George Russell. I mean, you know, you're not in bad company, are you? Do you know what I mean? And a few others as well. But I mean, yeah, for me, he's the one that stands out. I think it's going to be really interesting seeing him go up against Lando Norris at McLaren. So I think that's going to be a talking point all season long. But yeah, I just think he's the one that stands out for me. And I think a lot of people will be really interested to see how he gets on and whether or not he can make that step up. I mean, you know, Charles Leclerc, first season, for example, George Russell, you know, they were at the, you know, near the back of the grid. They were in those not back marker cars, but, you know, those cars, so they weren't competing for points regularly in podiums. I think this season could be something similar for Oscar Piastri. I don't think he's going to be fighting for podiums, definitely not. But is this a season where he can gain as much experience as he can and to really settle himself and embed himself in Formula One, and looking forward to the next few years, you know, maybe not even, you know, 2024, but 25, 26, could he be in a front running car and be fighting for the championship? We don't know. And that's why we're so excited about it, right?
There is a lot to talk about when it comes to Oscar Piastri. It's not just the whole contract saga and how things look from that perspective, but he's got this stellar junior record. And as you say, he come through the ranks winning everything. But I'm quite intrigued to see how Nick de Vries gets on a permanent basis, because I follow Formula E, and for anyone who isn't aware, I did a watch along of the opening Formula E round last weekend. That was quite fun with their Gen 3 cars. And de Vries is the first driver to come from FE over to Formula One on a permanent basis. And I don't think we should be surprised, because, of course, he's a former Formula 2 champion. And it was kind of frustrating that he couldn't get himself on the grid. But now he's got his chance. And I think he's gone away. He's put a few more skills to his repertoire. And I think it's going to be really interesting how he brings that across. So let's talk a little bit more about Oscar Piastri. There's obviously a lot of noise around him. And with that comes a high level of expectation. Obviously, this is dependent on the car that McLaren provide, because last year they were a little bit up and down with Lando Norris and Daniel Ricciardo. Is there a chance that Oscar Piastri under-delivers this year at McLaren?
It's a really difficult one, isn't it? I don't think anyone thought that Daniel Ricciardo would under-deliver as much as he did when he went to McLaren. We're talking about a top-class driver here, and I know some people will say, no, he's washed, he's finished, blah, blah, blah. He's still a top-class driver, and for whatever reason, it just didn't work out for McLaren. So, yeah, realistically, you've got to say it could happen. There is potential for that to happen. That being said, I think Oscar Piastri is a driver who comes in with loads of confidence. He's won everything that he's touched for the last 3-4 years, right? I think he also comes with no bad habits, in that Daniel Ricciardo, the Red Bull suited him down to the ground, and he when he went to Renault, it took him a season to get up to speed, and he got that podium in his second season, for example. It took him time to get used to the car. It then took him time to get used to the McLaren, and it just didn't work out for him for whatever reason. Oscar, is that because he was just so used to his driving style at Red Bull that, you know, it took a little while to get that out of the system? Oscar Piastri comes with no bad habits. He can jump in the car. Yeah, he's had a few demo runs, but and an FP1, but I don't think that you don't create habits in that time period. I think he will come in and he will learn a Formula One car in that McLaren, and he will learn the characteristics of that car in that car that he will be driving for the season. So I don't think we should expect fireworks from him in the first, few races. I think a lot of drivers take a little bit of time to get up to speed. But I do think that once Oscar Piastri is up to speed, I don't think he'll be too far away from Lando Norris at all. I don't think there'll be the gap that we saw between Lando Norris and Daniel Ricciardo in 2023 with Oscar Piastri coming in. I just can't see it happening. So
it's interesting that you mentioned about Piastri's not got bad habits, because Lando actually found himself in a very similar situation. He came in as a fresh-faced, how old was he, 13, 14 years old? How old are they going into these cars now? He had none of that, like you say, that habit of driving another car. Ricciardo's turned up, and it was a very specific driving style for the Red Bull. And you see how Max Verstappen gets the most out of it. It takes that sort of driving style, real confidence on the brakes. And if they don't have that, they're kind of at sea. So Piastri comes in with, it's basically a blank sheet of paper for McLaren, and they give him this car. And unless he's got a fundamental driving style problem, then he should be able to work his way into it and learn with that car. And then all of a sudden, McLaren, maybe down the road, have two drivers who are incredibly quick. And we're looking at potentially the next pair of teammates that are going to battle for a world championship. And with that being said, it's going to be quite interesting to see how he does against Lando, because, like you said, we didn't expect Norris to trounce Ricciardo in the way that he did, even though Ricciardo was the driver who walked away with the victory in their 2 years as teammates. How do you see him comparing against Lando Norris, both this season and sort of longer term?
Yes, I think it's a really interesting one. As I said, I think he'll be there or thereabouts with Lando. I don't think he'll beat Lando over definitely not in 2023. I can't see that happening. But Oscar Piastri has so much potential, right? And for me, I think perhaps McLaren know that if they can't provide Lando Norris a championship-winning car in the next few years, he could be the one to go and replace Lewis Hamilton at Mercedes when Lewis Hamilton decides to call it a day. So have they brought Oscar Piastri in to lead the team moving forward into 25, 26, 27? It's a very long-term game. Obviously, everyone knows the whole saga that went on in the summer. It cost McLaren a lot of money, right? And I don't think you spend that much money just purely to get a second driver who's as quick as the first driver. I think they were cheaper options that they could have gone for that. I think they've spent that much money with a view to Oscar Piastri leading the team. I think they realistically know that Lando Norris could potentially go in the next few years if Lewis Hamilton retires. And I think they brought Oscar Piastri in to be their team leader and to perhaps even mold the team around Oscar Piastri. So I think it's a really interesting one. I don't think Lando's looking elsewhere just yet. I think he's very happy at McLaren, but I think Oscar. Listen, I'm excited about that partnership. To be honest with you, I think Oscar Piastri, Lando Norris, a very strong partnership. Yes, Oscar's a rookie this season, and it will take him a bit of time to get up to scratch. But if McLaren still have that driver pairing in 2024, and Oscar Piastri has been as good as we think he's going to be, he's there or thereabouts with Lando Norris. That's one of the best driver pairings on the grid, in my opinion, moving into 2024. And yeah, we're saying this, and the guy hasn't even driven a race yet. I'm very conscious of that, but we know how much potential he has. So yeah, it's an interesting one.
Yeah, I was thinking of the phrase potential as you were speaking there. It really is a partnership dripping in potential. It's like Yorkshire puddings soaked in gravy levels of potential. If this comes off for McLaren, they've got an incredible partnership.
Yeah.
They've got a pair. If let's say Piastri gets up to speed relatively quickly in the opening races, bags a few points, maybe if there's a crazy race, he picks up a podium or something. Like Norris has done that the last couple of years. Last year, the only driver outside of the top three teams to get a podium, and McLaren still didn't finish fourth in the constructors. That shows you how much Daniel Ricciardo was kind of weighing the team down with his performance. If Piastri can hit the ground running and score some regular points, of course, depending on what the car is capable of, we could be looking at a midfield topping partnership that then, if they can smash through that ceiling that separates the midfield and the top three, they could join the big boys and McLaren can be a real force again. And I think for fans who have been watching the sport for a long time, like we have, seeing McLaren only bobbing around in the midfield, it doesn't seem quite right. They are a top team and they should be there. Obviously, there's certain infrastructure things that they're investing in. And I think the loss of Andreas Seidel is not so much of a loss at the moment because of the infrastructure they've got. They've got two excellent drivers and they're really, really well set. I think their future, it looks very bright. I would say it looks orange, but that would be too much of a pun.
I think the other aspect of this, right, is this is a big season for Lando Norris, right? Because if Oscar, he had Carlos Sainz when he first went up against Carlos Sainz and he did very well. I know he didn't beat him, but Carlos Sainz, we know he's a good driver, right? You've then got Daniel Ricciardo, and everyone thought, wow, how close can Lando Norris get to Daniel Ricciardo? He beat him in both seasons and trounced him in 2022, right? So everyone is now thinking Lando Norris, what a driver. It's a big season for him. If Oscar Piastri beats him this season, then all of a sudden his reputation changes, right? Yeah. Or does that show how good Oscar Piastri is? It's so up in the air, if you like. And I do think it's a big season for Lando Norris. I think he has to deliver. I think he has to solidate himself as a team leader, and I think he has the characteristics to do that. But he's also got to put in the performances to consistently beat Oscar Piastri, not only in race train but also in qualifying as well. We know how good Oscar Piastri is. 62% or 62.5% pole position rate in his Formula 2 year in qualifying. He got 5 out of 8 pole positions, which is 5 in a row as well in the last
impressive.
5 races. It's seriously impressive, right? He's good over one lap. So Lando Norris has got his work cut out to out-qualify him this season regularly. And if he doesn't do that, I think that does put a little bit of a dent in Lando Norris's resume, if you like. So it's a big season for Lando. It's a big season for Oscar, of course, but it's also a very big season for Lando. But I'm so excited to see these two go up against each other. I think out of all of the partnerships on the grid, that's probably the one I'm most excited for in 2023.
That's really, really interesting because there's so many stories to be written within all of the teams. You've got the French battle at Alpine. You've got Russell and Hamilton maybe locking heads at Mercedes. And I really like that you brought up the pole position stat for Piastri, because one of my judges, a personal judge of a strong driver, is their one lap pace. And if they can drag a car in qualifying to a position where it doesn't deserve to be. So you think George Russell, Spa 2021, you think Alonso in the Minardi doing crazy things. And especially in the wet weather, I don't remember Piastri doing wet qualifying. I wasn't following that closely. It was that crazy year when there was, I don't know, 100 races on an F2 weekend or something. It was madness, absolute madness. But I feel a good judge of a driver's potential is their one lap pace, because as we've seen with drivers like Lewis Hamilton, if you've got that core one lap pace, you can then unleash that in the race. And then you learn how to put the stint together. You learn your racecraft in terms of the strategy and bringing it all together. So I think Piastri, if he's got that one lap pace in F1 and he can really challenge Lando in qualifying, that really sets him up for good Sundays, because, well, we've seen how easier these cars are to race against each other. So there's no reason why he can't be there in the fight. And someone who will be hoping to be in the fight with him is the first Formula E driver to come to Formula One, Nick de Vries. He's also a Formula 2 champion back in 2019. He impressed in his Superstar outing for Williams in Monza. Is he going into AlphaTauri as their lead driver, considering his previous success compared to Yuki Tsunoda, who's had 2 years now of F1 experience?
I wouldn't say so. I think Nick, people forget how, Nick de Vries is in his late 20s, right? He brings an awful lot of experience. He's the Formula 2 champion of 2019, something that Yuki Tsunoda doesn't do. I rate Yuki Tsunoda a lot, by the way. But you're talking about a driver who Nick de Vries, Yuki Tsunoda finished higher in his first season of Formula 2 than Nick de Vries did in his first 2 seasons of Formula 2. Nick de Vries won the championship in his 3rd season. So yes, he does, come with a lot of experience, if you like, and he comes with the tag of a Formula 2 champion. But I think if Yuki Tsunoda had done a 2nd season, a 3rd season of Formula 2, he probably would have won the championship as well in that time, right? So it's a really difficult one for me. I think, again, that's a really exciting rivalry. I think they're both fairly similar. I think Nick brings a degree of adaptability in terms of his obviously his experience in Formula E and what he's learned there and what he can bring to Formula One and bring to AlphaTauri. I think Yuki has real good outright pace, in my opinion. I think if he had more consistency and he was more consistent, I think Yuki would be a really good driver. So I think it's a good pairing. I think they're fairly similar. I think I'm interested to see how that plays out as well. And I want to get your opinion on this, Aaron. But for me, I think Nick de Vries has got that drive more on his Formula 2 season or his Formula 2 winning season than he has on his Formula E championship winning season. Because for me, you follow Formula E closely as well, and I think that championship was so unpredictable and it wasn't, with the qualifying format as well, it wasn't necessarily about the quickest driver that season. It was more about the most consistent driver, the person that was there or thereabouts in every single race. And for me, I don't think AlphaTauri have looked at his Formula E winning season and said, that's the guy that we want. I think it's a career that they've monitored, and I think that they've looked at his Formula 2, his progress in Formula 2, constantly improving every season in Formula 2, ends up winning a championship in his 3rd season. He's then gone off to Formula E and gained some more experience. Not won the championship, well, he did win the championship, but they haven't said he's won the championship So we want him in the fit. I think they've looked at it and thought he's been in Formula E and he brings something different. His racecraft is clearly very good. It's very tight and technical in Formula E. So yeah, I'm interested to see what you think about that, whether they've gone off of his Formula E winning season or his Formula 2 winning season in terms of giving him the drive.
I think the Formula 2 campaign still sticks in their minds because he was kind of on the fringe of that Russell Norris Albon group. I don't think he was far away from sort of the level Alex Albon is. And obviously he subbed in for Albon in Monza and probably put the Williams exactly where Albon would have had it. And Albon had done 13 races by that point in the Williams. So to do that on the first attempt, considering on the Friday he'd driven the Aston Martin, which probably handled a little bit differently. He was fortunate in that the Williams was quick around Monza and it played to its strengths relatively. So he was able to show very well. But he did the job that was expected of him and perhaps even exceeded expectations, all things considered. So you married that performance in isolation with his ever-improving Formula 2 record, which culminated in winning the championship. Then you look at his Formula E season where he became champion, and they had the wild qualifying where the top 6 in the championship went out first, and if it rained, well, you've all got groove tires, off you go. There's no red flags here. So I think they've looked at the whole package, and really losing Pierre Gasly, they need to replace the Frenchman with someone like De Vries, ideally with a bit more Formula One experience. But I think AlphaTauri doesn't really exist to pluck Formula One drivers. It takes the best young talent, drivers they think could end up at Red Bull. And there's so many scenarios around that second Red Bull seat, considering what happened in Sao Paulo. And I don't know if you've seen the meme of the guy sitting on the chair. He's strapped to the chair and he's about to be thrown off the ledge with the bungee cord. And it's labelled as Perez and it's Max and Daniel Ricciardo about to push him off. Add Nick De Vries to that. If he starts the season really well and Perez has a bit of a sluggish start, which we hope not on this channel, because Sergio Perez is our channel mascot here after the F1 personality quiz provided that answer for us. So there could be an opening there for De Vries. Red Bull could go double Dutch, couldn't they?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's a real good opportunity for Nick De Vries. And if he starts, putting in the performances, then listen, Sergio Perez isn't going to be there forever, is he? So, and we know how cutthroat Helmut Marko can be. So I do think it's a really good opportunity for Nick De Vries. I think he's been fortunate in that. I think any other year that in Formula 2, Red Bull Junior is doing really well. I think that seat might have gone to a Red Bull Junior. Obviously, we all know what happened with Yuri Vips. I think Liam Lawson didn't necessarily have the best. Well, wasn't having the best season at the time he was announced. And I think any other season, a Red Bull Junior would have taken that seat. So I think he's been a bit fortunate in that sense. But absolutely take the opportunity. Do you know what I mean? As you said, he was unlucky in the first place in that he was probably within the same generation as generational talents such as Charles Leclerc, George Russell, Lando Norris, who we haven't seen drivers that talented coming through at the same time in a long time, right? So if that was 2 years later and he came into it was 2019, 2020 were his couple of seasons in Formula 2, I think he probably would have won the championship in 2020 and we'd all be saying he's won it in his second season what a driver Nick De Vries is, and he'd be guaranteed a Formula One seat. So yeah, I really like Nick De Vries. I'm really looking. He should have got a seat back in 2020. Really excited to see what he can do this season, and absolutely if he starts performing, particularly in the middle part of the season when silly season kicks off, if he's performing then and Red Bull are thinking it's time for a change with Sergio Perez, then he'll be there. He'll be someone that's being considered. Absolutely.
And talking of Formula 2, Red Bull have got plenty of metaphorical fingers in the pie, because they've got like 7 or 8 drivers they're backing in Formula 2. So if one of them is having a good season, and this isn't just Nick De Vries, Yuki Tsunoda can be included in this as well. Both those AlphaTauri seats are potentially up for grabs this year, because we've seen before that Red Bull aren't shy about moving drivers around. I mean, I'm not sure they'd quite go as far as booting out an F1 driver to put an F2 rookie in mid-season, but stranger things have happened.
Yeah, absolutely. It happened to Danny Fiat a few years ago, right? So I don't think Helmut Marko would be shy in doing that. Absolutely not. But I do think it's probably, I look at the Red Bull Juniors this season, unless a junior absolutely annihilated everyone in Formula 2, and there was either Nick De Vries or Yuki Tsunoda were performing that poorly, which I don't think they will. I don't think that will happen. But I'm excited to see a new crop. The one for me that stands out, we saw Dennis Hauger in Formula 3, how good he was. We saw him in Formula 2 last year. We all know that Ayumu Iwasa is a very good driver. The one for me that stands out is Zane Maloney. I think he has a great deal of talent, but I think it's probably a season too soon for him to be putting a championship together in Formula 2, and therefore get that promotion to Formula 1 mid-season. I think that's probably a bit too soon. So bar an absolute catastrophe, I think Yuki Tsunoda and Nick De Vries will be given the season, and I think it'll be really interesting to see who comes out on top, and whether or not they are at the level, and maybe the AlphaTauri car is at the level in order to showcase their talent, in order to push for a Red Bull seat in the future. But we'll see. Obviously, that depends on Sergio Perez and Daniel Ricciardo as well. Who knows if their long-term plan is to put Daniel Ricciardo back in that car? I don't think it is, but who knows? No one knows what Helmut Marko is thinking. No one. So
I'd love to see Ricciardo put in there. And I know this might not go down so well with some people. I'm an advocate of 3-car teams, because then, like, when Mercedes had that all-conquering W11 and W10, they could have had George Russell in there alongside Bottas and Hamilton. Then you'd have known exactly how good everybody is. You'd have Perez, Ricciardo, and Verstappen. I'm not sure if anyone will want to be a Ferrari, to be honest, the way they handle their season. But it does open those extra opportunities. And Ricciardo really is a wild card in all of this. He's their third driver at Red Bull. He could actually end up in an AlphaTauri this season. That's not outside the realms of possibility. But let's move away from AlphaTauri into the team that finished bottom of the table last year, Williams, and they have put Logan Sargent into the car after just one season of Formula 2. Now, he did run Oscar Piastri very, very close for the F3 title in 2020, and he did really, really well in Formula 2 last year. Had a little bit of a purple patch mid-season, winning in, where did he win? He won
Silverstone
and Spielberg, yeah. But I'm kind of worried that this has come a year too early for him. What do you think?
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you. I think no one doubts Logan Sargent's pace. I think he's a very quick driver. I think he's a consistent driver. I don't think he'll be fazed by the pressure. Absolutely not. Whether or not he's got the experience to step into Formula One at this point, I don't know. It's an interesting one. As you say, if we're talking about Oscar Piastri and how exciting he is, Logan Sargent was the one who ran him all the way to the last race of the season in Mugello in terms of that Formula 3 championship. So that is definitely a good thing. Obviously, for funding reasons, he then had to do another season in Formula 3. He stepped into Formula 2 this season. And I think you're absolutely spot on when you say he hit a purple patch at the right part of the season. Just when it was dry, it was silly season in Formula 1. He was the one where we were sat on the F2 show with Inside F2 saying, is this guy a title contender, right? He finished miles off the title. He was never going to win the title. But the point where, he was on an upward trend, wasn't he? It was he started the season consistent. I think he was the only driver to get to be in the points for every race after the fourth round, right? So the consistency's there. Then the performance started to and he got that win in Austria. He got that win at Silverstone, and everyone's thinking, yeah, okay, Logan Sargent, he's a championship contender here. It just fell off, didn't it? And there was a few mistakes, like there's a mistake in Spa, for example, where he stuck it in the wall, and it did show perhaps some dents in his in his locker. But listen, he's a good driver. He's a very good driver. I think he'll do a good job. I think he'll probably do a better job than Nicholas Latifi does. No disrespect to Nicholas Latifi, but I do think he's the better option in terms of those. Whether or not, yeah, I do think he probably maybe another season in Formula 2 would have been beneficial, and then with a view to being in Formula 1 next season. But listen, Williams have made their choice. It's definitely a good move from a marketing perspective. He got 3 home races this year, which is incredible. I'm sure he'll absolutely love that, and I'm excited to see how close he can get to Alex Albon. And I hope he surprises us. I hope that he can get nice and close to Alex Albon, maybe score some points this season, and we'll all be saying, Logan Sargent, what a good appointment that was. So
yeah, it's good that you mentioned he's got 3 home races. He's got 1 in his home state. He's from Florida, so he'll be maybe the only person who's happy to go to Miami that weekend. But like you say, there has been some flaws shown in his game. But then you do get these drivers that you put them in a Formula One car and they just take off. They weren't made to sit in junior single seaters or touring cars. They were built to be put in a Formula One car and drive it really fast. So it's one of those things. It could go either way. He might need some time, but this could be a bit of a free hit for him in that Williams had a real struggle last season, and they've now appointed James Vowles, and I think that's a shrewd appointment, and that's probably quite good for Logan in terms of it's a new team principal who's come from a really experienced team of victories and championships, and that guidance could be really, really good for him. And I think, he's got the pace, everything's there. He just needs to iron it all out. Would you agree that it's a free hit of a season?
Yeah, I do think so as well. I actually think that James Vowles and Logan Sargent starting at the same time gives them both time, in that they're both young individuals who are showing a lot of potential and could in the future be absolutely brilliant. But I think that team will now be viewed as a young team, a growing team, a team with lots of potential, rather than if, for example, if they just had a young team principal or they just had a young driver, they wouldn't necessarily come with that tag. So I think having them in together as young prospects means that the team as a whole looks younger and is building for the future, which means that the pressure's off for 2023. I think they're probably looking at 2024, 2025 as, Logan's got a year under his belt, James Vowles has got a year under his belt, and that's when we'll start pushing on. So I do think it's a clever appointment by Williams getting James Vowles in there at the same time as Logan Sargent. I'm interested to see. For me, I was under the impression that Darlington wanted to take that next step, and they were a bit frustrated at the progress. So I think it is a gamble to go with both of those guys on the same season. I think that is a gamble if they wanted to see progress. But maybe they're thinking into the future now. Maybe they've parked that and they're thinking into the future. So yeah, let's wait and see. I think Williams could be a team of exciting, a lot of ambition and a lot of excitement over the next couple of years.
Yeah, it's an interesting strategy they've got, and we have to remember that Dalton are investment people. So obviously the most high profile person in Formula One who's similar to them is Toto Wolff, and he has a partial share in Mercedes. So they don't do things without putting the thought into it first. They'll always have an exit strategy. I mean, I can see them, putting the effort into Williams, making them this proper midfield team again, and then selling up. That's where I see it going. And maybe that's the cue for a Porsche or maybe Hyundai or someone else coming in and buying the team. Obviously, then, the Williams name still has to stay there, but I think that's their plan, and putting in a young driver with the talent of Logan Sargent, a young team principal with the talent of James Vowles, I think that sets them up really, really well. And you've got a good midfield benchmark in Alex Albon, which sets them, if they do things correctly, sets them in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely agree.
So we've spoken now about all 3 of F1's 2023 rookies. I'm going to put you on the spot, Fraser. Which of these drivers will have the best season in 2023 and why?
Yeah, good question. I do think it'll be Oscar Piastri. I do think that he from the get-go will be there or there or thereabouts. So I don't think he'll be beating Lando Norris, as I said, but I think he will be. It helps that he's in the best car, obviously, so he's going to be regularly fighting for points. You would hope, I'm sure, but I do think he's the one who comes with the most talent, the biggest reputation, and the tools to do the job as well. He's got a driver coach there in Mark Webber, who will be giving him a lot of expertise and experience that I think it will be beneficial for him. I think McLaren are a very well-oiled team with a lot of experience in that team, and I think just the combination of Oscar Piastri and McLaren will be one that I think will succeed this season. So I do have to say Oscar Piastri.
I think the obvious choice is Piastri because he's got this raw talent that he's shown through his junior season. But you can easily make a case for De Vries, you can make a case for Sargent because it's kind of all relative. So if you look at Sargent, just achieving that regular, consistent performance, that could be success. And perhaps, Piastri has a few coming together with other people in the midfield, or De Vries and the AlphaTauri could be absolutely rotten again. But I think we have to lean towards Oscar Piastri. He's this phenomenal talent. It was such almost war to get his signature. I mean, I haven't seen people fight over a signature since David Beckham walked out of an airport. But it's just, you think logically, he's in the strongest team out of the three. And he's got an excellent teammate to benchmark himself against and almost reach to. Alex Albon is a perfectly good Formula One driver, but I don't think he's going to achieve a podium outside of a Red Bull. Nick De Vries is a bit of an unknown quantity at this level because, of course, he's won races and won the World Championship in Formula E. But that's a very different type of racing. And I was watching the race last week and Jake Hughes said it was nothing like he'd ever done before. And he's coming from Formula 2. So I think Piastri, everyone's waiting for him to set the season on fire, isn't he? And just be absolutely blindingly quick. And I can't wait to see it.
I think you're right in that performance is all relative, right? I mean, Logan Sargent, Oscar Piastri is probably going to be targeting points on most weekends, right? Or a point at least in all weekends. Logan Sargent, I don't think will be aiming for points. Absolutely not. He will be aiming for that consistency and, as you say, to get as close to Alex Albon as you can. And if Oscar Piastri doesn't score any points and he is, a second a lap off the pace of Lando Norris, whereas but still finishing 13th, for example, whereas Logan Sargent is nice and close to Alex Albon, every weekend, has the occasional good result, but he's finishing 17th every weekend, then you'd say that Logan Sargent has had the better season probably. So it is all relative, absolutely. But can you imagine, by the way, if Oscar Piastri, after all of that in the summer, two teams fighting for his signature, everyone thinking that this guy, this is a guy who still hasn't raced a race in Formula One, right? And there was everything that went on over his signature in the summer. Can you imagine if he goes to McLaren and has an absolute shocker of a season? I think McLaren will be absolutely gutted. I think Alpine will be rubbing their hands together, laughing at the fact that they have let this guy go, thinking that he's the next hot talent, and he turns out to be absolutely dreadful. Which I don't think is going to happen, but it would be hilarious, wouldn't it?
It would be. It'd be the most lamest, underwhelming performance you could ever imagine. I think it would ward McLaren off Australian drivers forever because they'd have just been burnt by two of them in a row. But like you say, I can't see that happening. His junior record is too good for it to happen. You get some drivers who turn up and they're duffers, but the ones that come through, like your Lewis Hamiltons, your Max Verstappens, Sebastian Vettel, they come through and they're going to be good. You just know that they're going to produce. And we're just waiting to see what Oscar Piastri can produce. Now let's move the conversation a little bit away from drivers and to teams. Of course, the big talk over the last few weeks in Formula One has been Andretti and Cadillac potentially, maybe, if the teams let them, if F1 let them, because the FIA want them, maybe coming to Formula One. When you heard this news, what did you think? What was your first reaction to that?
My first thought was absolutely brilliant. Daniel Ricciardo gets another shot in Formula One. That was my first reaction. I think it's great news. Listen, I 20 cars on the grid is great. I think 22 cars sounds better, and I think 24 cars sounds even better than that, right? So I think this is a step in the right direction. I like the combination of the two. I think the Andretti bid for me was, I don't know. I just felt like it lacked a bit of substance. So I think the combination really does, solidate it for me. I think it really, sounds like an attractive proposition now. So yeah, I would like to see it. I definitely like to see it. I don't think that'll be it's definitely not going to happen this season. Obviously, will it happen in 2024? It's a tight schedule if they're going to do that. Maybe 2025, or maybe at that point they might as well just wait for the new regs in 2026. I don't know, but I absolutely think it would be great news. I think Daniel Ricciardo would be a shoo-in for, pardon the pun, for that seat. And I think Daniel Ricciardo alongside Colton Herta, for example, would be absolutely incredible. I'd like to have seen Colton Herta in Formula One this season. So I think that would be a lovely combination. So yeah, it's exciting, isn't it? For me, I would like to see I'd like to see 12 teams in Formula One personally, and I would like to see another big manufacturer come in. And I think Audi coming in is good news. I'd like to see maybe Porsche have the 12th team, for example, or I don't know. Let's wait and see.
I think it's a really positive step for Formula One. And George Housen said this on my podcast last week. If you think back to Mercedes, they were seen as a luxury car brand. And now their involvement in Formula One as a world championship winning team on its own, not just associated with McLaren, they're seen as a sporting giant. Cadillac could do something similar in terms of its brand image being changed from that of a luxury manufacturer to a manufacturer that makes nice cars, but they're also a sporting juggernaut, and they deliver. And I think with Andretti as well, there's a real sort of balancing act when you have a manufacturer partnered with a racing team. So if you look at, like, Mercedes is a really good example of this, and how they almost went out of business when Honda pulled out, because currently it's sort of a racing team being sponsored by Mercedes, but it was Honda who then pulled out, and they lost so many members of staff. The team almost folded, and that's the balance you've got to strike. Andretti, if they come in as Andretti, they'll always be there because they're Andretti. They want to go racing. But if they come in as a manufacturer, the risk is they pull out and they take everything with it, and people lose jobs. And we don't want to see that. We saw that at the start of the 2010s, where BMW, Toyota, Honda, all of them were just running for the hills away from Formula One. But if Cadillac are serious about this, then it's really, really good for Formula One, and it taps into the American market. Get Colton Herta in the car, because he's this really, 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 really rough diamond. His car control is insane. Did you see the clip of him at Indianapolis last year, where it was semi-wet, semi-dry, and he's basically Tokyo drifting it through the S's out the back at Indy? It was just crazy.
It reminded me of Max Verstappen in like Brazil 2016, for example. It was phenomenal, yeah.
Crazy levels of car control. And if you want a serious American market, you need American drivers. Logan Sargent is a first step, but if you have an American driver in an American team, an all-American team, you've probably cracked America. And like you say, Daniel Ricciardo is a really good option because he brings that F1 experience to the team, and the marketing. He's very, very good on T-shirts and that big smile. Get him out all the parades across America. He'll love living in America, but that's a long way off. If it's 2026, Ricciardo is what, 33 now? I mean, Lewis Hamilton turned 38 a couple of weeks ago. And Formula One drivers are lasting longer and longer, unless they're Sebastian Vettel and they decide they've got different things to do. Look at Fernando Alonso. He'll be there when he's 50 years old.
No,
Ricardo's age.
He's never going to retire, is Fernando Alonso, is he? But yeah, you're right. I've just had a look. 33 years old. So if he was to, if he was to come back in 2024, he'd be 34 years old. He brings a lot of experience from 4 different teams in Formula One. And I think, as you say, marketing wise, I mean, you can't ask for anyone better than Daniel Ricciardo, really, can you? So yeah. I think that would be a really good option, and then having an American hotshot, a young rookie in Colton Herta, for me, just seems like a no-brainer. Really, really excited and hopeful that comes through.
I think as well, if you can get Colton Herta into an F1 car, it bridges that gap from IndyCar to Formula One, because we've seen drivers like Romain Grosjean, Christian Lundgaard, Callum Eilert have gone from F1, F2, the European racing circuit, over to America, and they're doing reasonably well. They've not won races yet, but they're close. Grosjean has come close. He's got podiums. He's got pole positions. But it does show you that the level is pretty good out there.
If we can 500 get drivers, winner, Marcus Armstrong. Exactly. Sorry, not Marcus Armstrong. Marcus Ericsson even.
It could be Marcus Armstrong and Takuma Sato as well. 2-time Indy 500 winner. And, he was famed for driving an F1 car very fast, but very, very raw. If we can get drivers coming from IndyCar to Formula One, a la Jacques Villeneuve, Juan Pablo Montoya, but maybe with a little bit more interest, it would really knit everything together, because you can then bring the best from Formula E and the skills that provides, the best from IndyCar and the skills that provides, and put them against the very best in Formula One. And that's kind of the ideal model for Formula One. Everything feeds into there. You take all the best talent and you bring it into Formula One. Of course, the cars have got to be raceable and work in a certain way. But I think this could be a positive first step. We'll be looking back in 30 years and going, wow, that was the moment everything changed.
Yeah, absolutely. It could well be. So, and I don't. There's no negatives for me for that. I mean, Formula One drivers going over to Indy. I'd love to watch the Indy 500 with more Formula One drivers in there, for example. Likewise, Indy car drivers coming and giving it a go in Formula One. I don't think there's a negative to that. So, absolutely, would love to see that.
Absolutely, I fully agree. The more sort of almost crossover you get, that cross-pollination, it's good for everyone, because it draws eyes to it. So Romain Grosjean going over to IndyCar, I've started watching IndyCar, and I'm sure a lot of other F1 fans have started following his progress. And if you brought an American driver in, let's say Scott Dixon came over to Formula One, or Will Power, that would get American eyes on Formula One. And Australia, New Zealand, they already watch Formula One, but they'd have even more of a vested interest. So like you say, no negatives to this. That is a brilliant conversation, Fraser. Thank you so much for coming on. Can you tell us where we can find more from you and more from the F2 show, Inside F2?
Absolutely. Inside F2, we've got a website, www.insidef2.com. We've got social media channels. We're at F2 Inside on Twitter. We're at Inside Formula 2 on Instagram. We're on TikTok. We're on YouTube. We're everywhere, to be fair. Everywhere you'd usually find everyone, we're there. So go and check that out. Yeah, as you said, like the F2 show is our podcast. We've got lots of features coming up this season. Hopefully a few driver interviews we've got coming your way, and a season preview coming your way very shortly. So lots to get our teeth into. So yeah, come and check us out.
You can find more from me on F1 Chronicle and on Inside F2. I write for them as well. You can follow me on Twitter. They'll be in the show notes below, as will all the links that Fraser has mentioned. Make sure you check out more content from this channel. So I've had chats with Ruby Price and George Howson over the last couple of weeks, and you can see my shorts mini-series, A Good Season Is, where I talk about what a good season might be for each team this year. If you enjoyed the show, give it a nice big thumbs up. Subscribe for more Grand Prix content. Subscribe to Inside F2 on YouTube as well. And thank you very much for watching.